I think the use of data sets, the analytics using AI, ML, and technology are collectively going to be the key enablers in helping accelerate the diagnostic journey. If I talk about the data set, there are going to be many data sets that will play a critical role in constructing the solution for accurate and quicker diagnosis.
Welcome to the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast, where we delve deep into the life sciences industry and uncover effective strategies, innovations, and future trends. Your host, Axtria's Jasmeet Soni, engages highly acclaimed leaders in discussions focused on directing commercial success in the life sciences industry. Whether you're transforming your commercial success strategy or just craving dynamic discussion, this is the show for you.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Jasmeet Soni and welcome to the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Axtria. Our goal with this show is to bring to you effective strategies, innovations, and most importantly, people who are driving improved business and patient outcomes within the life sciences industry. Our guest today is Vikram Batra. Vikram is a senior leader in Axtria's decision science practice with over 20 years of analytics, consulting, and leadership experience. He has worked on both ends of the spectrum, working for large pharma as well as a long tenure as a management consultant. Vikram has a proven track record of addressing challenging strategic issues for pharmaceutical customers and helping them with comprehensive solutions across brand strategy, sales operations, and market access. He has built, coached, and led diverse analytics teams that successfully deliver insights using advanced data analytics and AI. His experience spans across global markets, including top 5 EU, Australia, Canada, and other geographies. Before joining Axtria, Vikram held various roles of increasing responsibilities and leadership at MarketRx, Sanofi, Information Resources, and Health Products Research. Vikram, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Sure, Jasmeet, and thanks for having me on this show.
Absolutely. Vikram, we are touching on an extremely important topic today, the use of AI and software to accelerate discovery, diagnosis, and treatment of rare disease patients. This is an area that will be key in deciding future winners and losers in the life sciences industry. Can you give our audience some background on how the industry is shifting towards rare diseases and what it means in the long run?
Absolutely, Jasmeet. I think what we're seeing here is a major shift and focus towards rare diseases. And actually, if you think about it, this has been happening for some time now. I'll quote a few things here. So the FDA, the US FDA, defines a rare disease as a disease that affects less than 200,000 patients in the US. And there are roughly about 7,000 rare diseases affecting about 30 million people in the US. So it's a sizable patient population that's affected by these rare diseases. But when we look on the other side, the effective treatments are available only for about 5% of those rare diseases. And there are a few reasons why the treatment kind of lacks the focus on rare diseases. So pharma traditionally has been hesitant to invest in this space. The development and commercialization of rare disease is an incredibly difficult area for any company. And then there is the economics and the disease awareness that makes it even harder to justify investment in these areas. But what we also have been seeing is lately the governments have been incentivizing the development and commercialization of treatments for rare diseases. And this is happening through various means. There is the extended marketing exclusivity. There are the tax credits and the grants for drug development. We are seeing accelerated approval pathways, like what FDA defines as the breakthrough therapy designations. And then there's also the reduced statistical burdens for clinical development. And because of these efforts, we are seeing a growth in rare disease research. We are seeing increasing number of approvals for rare disease drugs. And that trend, I think, is expected to continue for the foreseeable future.
Vikram, that was a great overview of the transition that the industry is seeing towards rare diseases. Now let's talk about the challenges. Rare diseases are a completely new paradigm in context of traditional blockbusters and drugs that were developed for patient populations of millions. I'm assuming this new environment brings a lot of challenges across the value chain. Can you describe what these challenges are and how pharma leaders are dealing with them?
Yeah, sure, Jasmeet. So I think there are many challenges that are unique to rare disease drugs. I think it starts with tackling the awareness. That could be quite low given the small affected population. And this is where the patient advocacy groups can play a critical role in helping and amplifying that awareness. The second, which is most talked about, is the diagnosis. So the diagnosis with rare disease can be quite complex. The diagnostic journey is very challenging and painful for the patients. So the statistic is that people suffering from these rare diseases spend between 5 to 7 years before they can receive a correct diagnosis. And during this time, as you can imagine, patients are going from one physician to another. They're going through a lot of misdiagnosis. They're really trying to find that physician who has the necessary expertise to provide that correct diagnosis. So there's a lot of heartbreak, there's a lot of frustration, and in some cases, it actually may be too late for certain patients because these diseases can be very fatal. The third challenge is the treatment choice. As you can imagine, these diseases, as well as the treatment options, are extremely complex. They do require a lot of scientific and clinical messaging to ensure the benefits of these treatment options can be understood well by the physicians as well as the patients. So education is extremely critical, not just to the patients for awareness, but also to the physicians alike. And then there is the access to therapy. Again, these drugs are expensive treatments. They do involve a pretty cumbersome process to navigate the insurance and the managed care processes. So patients suffering from these diseases will need a lot of support to gain access. And the last challenge I would quote is the patient management, kind of the ongoing maintenance of these patients. And that's where the patient support programs are going to be absolutely critical to provide that ongoing education and support. It is a rather long and complex cycle from disease identification to diagnosis to treatment. And that's where patient support services will play an important role, not only to help patients get on therapy, but also to ensure strong compliance and adherence to these treatments. So these are, I would say, some of the challenges that would need to be tackled so we can deliver positive patient outcomes and make a real difference in patient lives.
Yeah, and it does sound like it'll make a real difference, and not just on the patient lives, but also the revenue impact would be immense. Now, Vikram, it is interesting to note that we are talking about patient discovery, diagnosis, and treatment in a single sentence. For most traditional drugs, these were considered three distinct areas targeted by separate teams. What has changed with rare diseases, and why are we talking about them as if they are connected and working towards a single objective?
Yes, Jasmeet, I think you're absolutely correct. And there are several contributing factors that make rare diseases unique, and hence the need to have a very connected approach for tackling this complexity. So I would state there are three kind of things I would highlight. One is kind of the patient dimension. As we know, these diseases have a very small patient population. There is the limited disease awareness, and it's a rather lengthy time span for a patient to go from symptom onset to an accurate diagnosis. The second is the physician dimension. So it's not just about the patients who are affected by these extreme conditions, but also physicians who are generally not specialized and trained to diagnose patients early on in their treatment journey. And the reality is that some of these physicians may only actually see a single patient suffering from a given rare disease in their entire medical career. So it's a pretty complex puzzle here. And lastly, it's the R&D dimension, right? The rather small population of patients we're dealing with not only makes recruiting them for clinical trials challenging, but it also makes the ability to study different patient dynamics highly complex, understanding how the different types of patients will behave to a given treatment, or how the treatment will work under different conditions becomes extremely challenging. And to tackle this complexity, it does require what we call as a community of stakeholders to kind of come together to create that awareness, to provide that education and establish trust. So there will be many parties that will have to come together. There will be the disease advocacy groups. There will be the healthcare providers, the patients and their caregivers, all will have to kind of work together. And that's why this team-based approach becomes extremely critical when we are dealing with rare diseases.
Thanks, Vikram. You mentioned a very important aspect here, community of stakeholders. This is an important concept for pharma leaders to understand, as most of these stakeholders are currently being served as separate entities. And as pharma is moving towards serving this ecosystem, I'm curious to understand the role data and analytics would play here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Jasmeet. I think the use of data sets, the analytics using AI, ML, and technology are collectively going to be the key enablers in helping accelerate the diagnostic journey. If I talk about the data set, there are going to be many data sets that will play a critical role in constructing the solution for accurate and quicker diagnosis. There'll be the data from the patient claims. There'll be the electronic medical records, the data from the labs and the diagnostics, data from patient registries, data from patient support services. These are some of the data sets that will be extremely valuable. And the way these data sets will help us is they will help us in identifying the relevant markers that could be indicative of patients suffering from a given disease, and ultimately help us in finding what we call as the lookalikes, or other patients who have the greatest likelihood of being diagnosed with a given disease. In addition to some of these data sets that I mentioned, I think there'll be some other data sets that could also be useful. Some of these non-traditional data sets, such as data from social listening sources, can provide insights that can help us with fine-tuning our AI ML models and improving the accuracy of the predictions. So the goal at the end of the day is to have as robust and as comprehensive data library as is possible, and leveraging the power of AI, ML, and technology, we can make accurate predictions on patient diagnosis, on patient progression, and can really help in accelerating that journey for our patients.
That makes a lot of sense, Vikram. As you mentioned, there are so many diverse data sets. It seems the first big challenge is just to collect all that data and structure it and map it so it makes sense, and then ask the right set of questions during analyses. Now, how extensive is the role of artificial intelligence here? Is AI/ML helping solve the patient diagnosis problem?
Jasmeet, the role of AI/ML is huge for solving the patient diagnosis problem, right? The data and technology are making it possible to carry out investigative analytics that was not possible a few years back. Yep. It is making it possible to identify patterns in the data, those trends in the data that may not be evident otherwise. And frankly, we're not limited by the volume or the variety of the data or the modeling features or the variables, right? AI ML is offering us the ability to test all these different features and variables, and using different multiple mathematical approaches, from random forest to neural networks to ensemble models, for structuring the solution, for validating the outputs, for selecting the models with the highest statistical accuracy. And as you can imagine, these solutions are not one-time implemented and done, right? The accuracy of the AI ML models is enhanced by having data being continuously fed from different sources. And these solutions are also able to self-learn. They are able to improve over a period of time, become faster and more accurate in disease identification and prediction. And this all has been possible through AI ML, right? AI ML is really enabling us to detect patterns, trends in the data that human eye is unable to observe, and is helping us solve the most complex problems in healthcare today, including what we're discussing here, which is the patient diagnosis problem.
And that is very interesting, Vikram. And it seems AI/ML is removing a lot of the limitations that we had with traditional analytics. In the closing, I would like to learn about the advantages of accelerating the diagnostic journey for rare diseases. Can you tell our audience the value this can bring to various stakeholders that are involved?
Sure thing, Jasmeet. I think solving the challenge of accelerating the diagnostic journey for rare disease is going to be a win-win for all, right? So I'm going to talk about patients first. So it will help to speed up the diagnostic journey. It will enable patients to get on treatment in a timely manner and reduce the pain they go through in getting a diagnosis. Second is the physician dimension, right? They'll be more successful in treating their patients. It will reduce misdiagnosis, and physicians will be better equipped in influencing the quality of patient lives, as well as potentially save many patient lives. And finally, it's the payers, right, who pay for these medications. So payers will benefit financially through reduced misdiagnosis and lower overall cost of treatment, and potentially saving them significant amount of money. And if I have to kind of summarize all this in one statement, I think by accelerating the diagnostic journey, we can really guide that right treatment to the right patient at the right time, and can deliver on our mission to deliver the best patient outcomes, improve the quality of life for those who suffer from these terrible diseases.
It's amazing what early diagnosis can mean for all the stakeholders, especially the patients who can get treatment faster. Thanks for all those insights. Before we go, I would like to summarize our discussion so the audience has some key takeaways. So what I understand is, one, having a good understanding of the patient journey in rare diseases is critical. Pharma leaders must adopt new ways to play in this ecosystem, or at least evaluate feasibility of this approach with pilots designed for specific rare disease drugs or regions. The goal should be early diagnosis of patients that will result in improved health outcomes at a lower cost. 2, pharma leaders must invest in relevant datasets and build the required infrastructure for new models that leverage AI/ML. And 3, accelerating speed of diagnosis is a win-win for all. Physicians will be more successful in treating their patients, payers will have reduced overall cost burden, and most importantly, it results in better health outcomes and improved quality of life for patients. Is there anything else you would like to add to the summary?
Sure, Jasmeet. I think you summarized it pretty well. The only thing I would add is that I think we are on a journey to solve a complex challenge for the industry. Patients suffering from these rare diseases go through a lot of heartbreak, a lot of frustration over several years. But I think now we have the necessary tools and assets to solve this challenge for the industry. And pharma has really stepped up to this challenge. It's focusing on bringing innovative treatments to the market. And now leveraging data and analytics, we can really make sure patients who need these drugs the most are able to benefit from them. So I think we are in a very good position to make a real difference here for patients suffering from these rare diseases.
Absolutely, Vikram. This has been an extremely insightful episode and a very timely one. You shared your knowledge on an extremely important question that we get asked frequently. What role will AI and software play in discovery, diagnosis, and treatment of rare diseases? I'm sure our audience will be able to apply some of these learnings to their business and serve all their customers and patient populations better. Before we go, is there anything that our audience can refer to if they wanted to learn more about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would recommend, or I would encourage people to check out Axtria.com. We have an Axtria Insights section where we have a lot of thought leadership artifacts available in various formats. We have white papers, we have blogs, we have videos, we have other podcasts, and we continue to put out new content every week. I think it's a great source for valuable industry insights, and I would encourage everyone listening to leverage it and benefit from it.
Well, Vikram, thank you so much for coming to the show and sharing your knowledge and deep experience in this space.
Thank you.
To the audience, thank you so much for joining us today and making this show such a big success. Please feel free to share any feedback, and I look forward to meeting you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast. If you loved this episode, please share with friends and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. For more information, visit lifesciencespodcast.com. Until next time.